The first warning came from a geologist, not a hunter, not a soldier, not one of the dozens of awakened mages studying the newly discovered world beyond Gate 7. A geologist. Unfortunately, nobody listened. By the time they realized he had been right, 43 people were dead. The gate had appeared 6 months earlier in the middle of Western Australia's Pilbara region. Like every gate that had emerged around the world during the previous decade, its appearance had sparked equal measures of fear and opportunity. At first, governments had treated gates as existential threats. Entire cities had been evacuated whenever one appeared. Militaries stood ready for invasions that never came. But humanity learned quickly. Most gates led to resource-rich worlds. Some contained magical beasts. Others held ancient ruins. A few revealed entirely new ecosystems unlike anything found on Earth. And all of them had one thing in common: money. Lots of it. The world beyond Gate 7 was no exception. Officially, it was designated Dimension AR7. The workers who spent weeks crossing its endless dunes had given it a much simpler name: the Red Sands. The name fit. Everything beyond the gate seemed painted in shades of crimson. Red dunes, red stone formations, red mountains visible on distant horizons. Even the sky carried a faint copper tint during daylight hours. It was beautiful and completely empty. Or so everyone believed. Ethan Walker stared out the reinforced window of the transport truck as red dunes rolled past beneath the afternoon sun. 27 years old, broad-shouldered and sunburned from years of FIFO work before his awakening, Ethan looked more like a mining supervisor than a hunter. The black combat vest stretched tightly across his frame, a silver badge identifying him as a licensed C-rank hunter hung from his chest. Not impressive, not embarrassing, just average. The kind of rank that paid the bills without attracting attention. Most C-ranks spent their careers guarding resource convoys, clearing low-level monster nests, and escorting survey teams. That was exactly why Ethan was here. The Australian Gate Authority had contracted him to accompany a geological expedition 300 kilometers beyond the gate. Nothing dangerous, nothing heroic, just another paycheck. Across from him sat Dr. Harrison Reed, a geologist in his early 50s with permanently dusty boots and a habit of muttering to himself. For the last 2 hours, the scientist had been staring at a tablet displaying seismic readings. Every few minutes, he frowned deeper. Finally, Ethan spoke. "You're making that face again." Harrison looked up. "What face?" "The one that says we're all about to die." The scientist snorted. "If we were about to die, I'd be making a different face." "Good to know." "Not really." That answer did absolutely nothing to reassure Ethan. He leaned forward. "So what's bothering you?" Harrison hesitated. Then he handed over the tablet. At first glance, the readings meant nothing. Wavy lines, numbers, graphs, the sort of thing that made Ethan wish he'd paid more attention in school. "See that?" Harrison asked. "I don't." "Exactly." Ethan handed the tablet back. The scientist sighed heavily. 3 weeks ago, we started detecting tremors." "Earthquakes?" "No." "Then what?" Harrison zoomed in on one of the graphs. "Earthquakes are chaotic, natural. These aren't." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" The geologist tapped the screen. They repeat. The truck hit a bump as Harrison continued. Every 48 hours. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Exactly 48? Within minutes. That was strange. Even Ethan knew nature rarely worked on schedules. What causes them? Harrison looked toward the desert outside. That's what I'd like to know. The convoy consisted of 6 armored vehicles, 2 transport trucks, 3 security carriers, 1 mobile command vehicle, 31 personnel in total. Most were contractors. A handful were hunters. Nothing unusual. The red sands had become increasingly busy as exploration expanded. Rare monocrystals had already generated billions of dollars in revenue. Mining companies practically fought each other for access rights. Every month, new expeditions pushed farther into unexplored territory. And every month, strange discoveries followed. Ancient ruins, massive fossil fields, crystal formations taller than buildings, enough mysteries to keep scientists employed for decades. The tremors were merely the latest entry on an increasingly long list. At least that's what everyone believed. The first sign something was wrong appeared shortly before sunset. Ethan noticed it while standing on top of a dune overlooking the convoy's temporary camp. The desert was silent, completely silent. No wind, no insects, no distant animal calls, nothing. Just endless red sand stretching to the horizon. A chill crept down his spine. He couldn't explain why. The place simply felt wrong. Nearby, a hunter named Marcus joined him. "Dinner's ready." Ethan nodded. Neither moved. Marcus followed his gaze. "You feel it too?" That surprised Ethan. "Feel what?" The older hunter shrugged. "Like something's watching." Neither laughed. That bothered Ethan more than the answer itself. Hunters learned to trust instincts. Awakened senses often noticed danger before conscious thought caught up. Usually, there was a reason. Eventually, Marcus broke the silence. "Probably nothing." Probably. Neither sounded convinced. The tremor struck at 8:17 p.m. At first, it felt like a passing vibration. A truck engine, distant machinery. Then the ground began to shake. Cups rattled, equipment toppled. Several workers stumbled to their feet. The vibration grew stronger and stronger and stronger. "What the hell?" someone shouted. Floodlights swung across the camp. The sand beneath Ethan's boots vibrated hard enough to blur his vision. For 5 terrifying seconds, it felt as though the entire desert was moving. Then it stopped. Just like that. Silence returned. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The sudden absence of sound felt almost worse than the tremor itself. Finally, Harrison sprinted from his tent carrying a tablet. His face had gone pale. Very pale. The kind of pale that immediately gets everyone's attention. Ethan walked over. What happened? The geologist didn't answer. Instead, he turned the screen around. A seismic map filled the display. A massive line stretched beneath the desert. At first, Ethan thought it was a fault line. Then he realized something impossible. The line had moved, not shifted, moved. As if something beneath the sand had traveled nearly 20 kilometers in less than a minute. The blood drained from Ethan's face. "What is that?" For several seconds, Harrison simply stared at the screen. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded smaller than Ethan had ever heard. "I don't know." The geologist swallowed. "But whatever it is..." His eyes drifted toward the darkness beyond the floodlights, toward the endless sea of red dunes surrounding the camp. It's heading this way. And somewhere out in that vast desert, far beyond the reach of human eyes, something enormous was moving beneath the sand. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The only sound was the low hum of generators and the distant whistle of wind moving across the dunes. Ethan stared at the seismic map. The line on Harrison's tablet wasn't small. It wasn't even large. It was absurd. The thing stretched for kilometers beneath the desert floor. Whatever had created that signal wasn't an animal. It couldn't be. Not even the largest monsters ever discovered beyond Earth's gates came close to that size. Yet the evidence was right there, moving, alive, heading directly toward them. "Tell me that's broken," Marcus said. Harrison didn't answer. The geologist's silence was answer enough. A cold feeling settled into Ethan's stomach. He had felt fear before. Every hunter had. But this felt different. Predators could be fought. Monsters could be killed. This felt more like standing in front of a tsunami, something too large to comprehend, too large to stop. A voice crackled over the camp radio. "All security personnel report to command immediately." The camp exploded into motion. Hunters grabbed weapons. Scientists rushed to secure equipment. Drivers started engines. Within minutes, the expedition leaders had gathered inside the mobile command vehicle. Ethan squeezed into the crowded space beside Marcus. The atmosphere felt tense. Everyone could sense it. Something had changed. The expedition no longer felt routine. The commander, a former Australian Army officer named Colonel Mitchell, stood at the front. He pointed toward a projection displaying the seismic data. "Dr. Reed believes we've detected a previously unknown life form." A murmur spread through the room. Unknown life form. That sounded far less frightening than what Ethan had seen on the screen. Mitchell continued. "At this stage, there is no indication the creature is hostile." Several hunters exchanged looks. Ethan nearly laughed. Something large enough to register across kilometers of desert didn't need to be hostile to be dangerous. The colonel folded his arms. "We break camp at first light and return to Base Echo." A few people visibly relaxed. Returning sounded sensible. The survey could always continue later. Then Harrison spoke. "I don't think that's a good idea." The room fell silent. The geologist looked exhausted. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses. "If my calculations are correct, the creature has been following our route for nearly 3 days." Nobody spoke. Ethan felt every muscle in his body tighten. Following. That word changed everything. Mitchell frowned. "You said you didn't know what it was." "I don't." "Then how can you know it's following us?" Harrison tapped the screen. "Because every recorded movement intersects with previous convoy paths." The projection shifted. A series of routes appeared across the desert. The seismic signals overlapped them almost perfectly. A knot formed in Ethan's stomach. That wasn't coincidence. Not anymore. The colonel stared at the data for several seconds. Finally, he sighed. "We leave immediately." Nobody argued. The convoy was moving within 20 minutes. Floodlights illuminated the dark desert ahead. Engines roared. 6 armored vehicles pushed through the night toward Base Echo. Normally, driving after sunset was prohibited. Visibility dropped dramatically in the red sands. But nobody wanted to remain in camp. Not after what they had seen. Ethan sat beside Marcus in the lead security carrier. Neither man spoke much. The atmosphere inside the vehicle felt heavy. Everyone kept glancing toward the darkness beyond the windows, as though expecting something to emerge. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Slowly, the tension began to ease. Maybe they had overreacted. Maybe the tremor truly was some strange natural phenomenon. Maybe. The radio exploded with static, then screaming. "Vehicle 6! Vehicle 6! Respond!" Ethan jerked upright. The transmission crackled again. More shouting, more panic. A soldier grabbed the radio. "Repeat your last message!" Static, then a terrified voice. "We've lost Vehicle 6. The convoy immediately slowed. "What do you mean, lost?" Mitchell demanded. The response came seconds later. "It's gone! Gone!" Ethan exchanged a look with Marcus. Vehicles didn't simply disappear. The convoy came to a complete stop. Hunters and soldiers poured out into the darkness. Floodlights swept across the dunes. The rear of the convoy should have been visible. Instead, there was only empty desert. Vehicle 6 had vanished. Completely. No wreckage, no fire, no debris, nothing. Just a massive depression in the sand, nearly 50 meters across. Ethan approached the edge. His pulse quickened. The crater looked fresh, as though something immense had erupted upward from beneath. Marcus crouched nearby. "Mate." Ethan followed his gaze. Tracks. Not tire tracks, not footprints, grooves. Huge grooves carved into the sand, leading downward, as though something enormous had dragged itself beneath the surface. A chill crawled down Ethan's spine. Suddenly, a distant scream echoed across the desert. Everyone froze. Another scream followed. Then gunfire. Automatic weapons. Hundreds of rounds. The sound came from somewhere beyond the dunes. "Move!" Mitchell shouted. The hunters sprinted forward. Ethan pushed mana into his legs. The familiar energy surged through his body. Sand exploded beneath his boots as he accelerated. Dune after dune flashed past. The gunfire intensified, then abruptly stopped. Silence. Terrible silence. Ethan reached the crest of a hill and looked down. His blood turned to ice. An armored personnel carrier sat overturned in the sand. Half crushed, the metal looked twisted, bent inward, like an empty drink can. Bodies lay scattered around it, some moving, most not. The scene resembled the aftermath of a bombing. Yet there were no signs of explosives, no scorch marks, no craters, nothing. Only destruction. Ethan hurried downhill. A wounded soldier grabbed his arm. The man's eyes were wide with terror. Underneath, Ethan knelt. What happened? The soldier struggled to breathe. "It came from underneath." Those words sent a wave of dread through everyone nearby. The soldier pointed toward the desert. His hand shook violently. So big. Then his eyes rolled back and he lost consciousness. A medic rushed forward. Ethan stood. The hairs on the back of his neck suddenly rose. Instinct screamed. Danger. Immediate danger. His Earth Affinity mana sensed vibrations. Tiny at first, barely noticeable, then growing stronger. The desert floor trembled beneath his boots. Ethan's eyes widened. No, the vibrations surged. A deep rumble echoed beneath the ground, like distant thunder. Except it wasn't distant. It was directly below them. "Run!" Ethan shouted. The ground exploded. A mountain of sand erupted skyward. Men screamed, vehicles flipped, floodlights shattered. For one horrifying moment, Ethan caught sight of it. Not the whole creature, just a fraction, a glimpse, enough. A colossal ring of armored flesh burst through the desert. Rows of jagged teeth lined a circular mouth wider than a suburban house. Red crystal formations glowed across its body. Its hide disappeared into the darkness above. The thing was so massive, Ethan couldn't even see where it ended. Time seemed to stop. Every person present stared upward in frozen disbelief. The creature let out a roar unlike anything Ethan had ever heard. Not a sound, a vibration, a deep, bone-shaking resonance that seemed to pass through the earth itself. Then the worm crashed back into the desert. The ground collapsed inward. Sand swallowed everything nearby. Vehicles, equipment, people, gone, consumed in seconds. Ethan barely managed to dive clear as the dune beneath him gave way. When the dust finally settled, silence returned once more. The desert looked unchanged, as though nothing had happened. But nearly half the convoy was gone, and every survivor now understood one terrible truth. Something lived beneath the red sands, and it was hunting them. Nobody spoke as the survivors regrouped. They simply stood in the darkness, staring at the stretch of desert where their friends had vanished. The convoy had entered the red sands with 31 personnel. Now only 17 remained. The realization settled over the group like a physical weight. Half of them were gone, not killed in battle, not lost to some monster raid, simply swallowed by the desert itself. Colonel Mitchell was the first to regain his composure. "Count ammunition, check injuries. We're moving." His voice remained steady, but Ethan could see the strain in his eyes. Even the hardened former soldier looked shaken. Nobody argued. Standing still felt dangerous. The thing beneath the sand could return at any moment. An hour later, the survivors were moving again. Only 3 vehicles remained operational. The convoy's powerful floodlights cut through the darkness as they pushed toward Base Echo. Nobody slept. Nobody relaxed. Every vibration beneath the wheels made people flinch. Every shifting dune looked like something rising from below. Ethan sat near a window, his eyes fixed on the desert. Mana flowed through his body in a steady stream. His earth affinity allowed him to feel subtle disturbances beneath the surface. Normally, that ability was useful for detecting ambushes or hidden monsters. Tonight, it felt more like a curse, because every few minutes, he sensed something. A distant vibration, a movement, always far away, always following. The worm was still there, keeping pace, waiting. Just before dawn, the convoy spotted stone structures emerging from the dunes, ancient ruins. The sight immediately caught Ethan's attention. Massive pillars protruded from the sand like broken teeth. Weathered walls stretched across the desert floor. Some portions had collapsed long ago, buried beneath centuries of shifting dunes. Others remained surprisingly intact. Harrison stared through the windshield. "My God." The geologist looked almost excited. "Nobody's reported ruins this far west." Mitchell frowned. "We don't have time for archaeology. We might not have a choice." Everyone turned toward Ethan. The C-rank hunter pointed toward the horizon. A massive dust cloud was forming behind them. The worm. Even from this distance, Its movement disturbed the entire desert. The colonel's expression darkened. How long? Ethan focused. Mana spread into the ground. The vibrations felt stronger than before. Closer, much closer. 20 minutes. Nobody needed further convincing. The convoy turned toward the ruins. The ancient city had once been enormous. Even in its ruined state, the scale was obvious. Towering stone arches stood half-buried beneath the sand. Roads vanished beneath crimson dunes. Statues weathered by time gazed silently toward the desert. And everywhere Ethan looked, he noticed the same symbol. A circle surrounded by jagged lines, again and again, carved into walls, etched into pillars, painted onto faded stone. It appeared everywhere, as though the ancient inhabitants had worshipped something, or feared it. Inside the largest structure, Harrison made a discovery, a mural. Dozens of hunters, soldiers, and scientists crowded around as floodlights illuminated the wall. The ancient artwork stretched nearly 20 meters. Ethan's stomach tightened. The mural depicted the desert, a gigantic worm, and an entire civilization kneeling before it. The creature dwarfed cities, its body stretched beyond the edges of the carving. Humans appeared as tiny specks beneath it. Above the image, ancient symbols covered the stone. Harrison studied them silently. Then his face went pale. "What is it?" Ethan asked. The geologist swallowed. "I think it's a warning." Nobody liked the sound of that. Harrison pointed toward the carving. "The translation isn't perfect. Tell us." The scientist hesitated. Then he read aloud. "The sovereign beneath the sands." Silence filled the room. "The devourer of mana. The king of the endless desert. The eternal hunger." Nobody spoke. The words felt less like a title and more like a death sentence. Then Harrison pointed toward another section, a smaller carving, one that made Ethan's blood run cold. It showed figures crossing through a circular portal, a gate, and above it stood the worm, watching, waiting. The gate attracted it, Ethan said quietly. Everyone looked at him. The pieces suddenly fit together. The tremors, the attacks, the pursuit. The worm feeds on mana. Ethan turned toward the mural. Every hunter crossing into this world. His voice trailed off. Nobody needed him to finish. The gate had become a beacon, a dinner bell, and humanity had been ringing it non-stop for 6 months. The first impact hit moments later. The entire structure shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. Someone screamed. Another impact followed. Stronger, closer. Outside, the desert erupted. A deafening roar rolled across the ruins. The Sand Sovereign had arrived. Chaos exploded throughout the city. People rushed for vehicles. Soldiers established firing positions. Hunters prepared spells and abilities. Ethan sprinted outside. The sight that greeted him nearly stopped his heart. The desert itself seemed alive. Massive waves of sand rolled toward the ruins. The worm moved beneath the surface like a shark through water, and it was enormous, far larger than anyone had realized. The section seen during the attack had merely been part of its body. Now Ethan understood the truth. This creature wasn't hundreds of meters long. It was kilometers long. A living catastrophe. The military opened fire. Machine guns thundered. Mana-infused rifles spat glowing rounds. Explosions lit the dawn sky. The attacks meant nothing. The worm continued advancing, unstoppable, relentless. Ancient stone structures collapsed as it approached. Entire towers disappeared beneath moving sand. The ruins shook violently. People ran in every direction. Some never made it. The ground opened beneath them, then closed again. Gone. Ethan knew they couldn't win. The creature was too large, too powerful, too old. But maybe they didn't need to kill it. Maybe they only needed time. A plan formed in his mind. Desperate, dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it was all they had. "Ethan!" Marcus shouted. "What are you doing?" The hunter ignored him. Instead, he ran toward the largest remaining tower. Mana surged through his body. Every reserve he possessed. Every ounce of power. The stone beneath the city responded. Cracks spread through the foundations. The ancient ruins groaned. Ethan pushed harder. Blood trickled from his nose. His vision blurred. Still he continued. The tower began to fall. The Sand Sovereign erupted from the desert. A nightmare of teeth, crystal, and armored flesh. Its enormous mouth opened. The roar that followed shook the entire city, and then the tower collapsed. Thousands of tons of ancient stone crashed downward. The ruins gave way. A section of canyon hidden beneath the city suddenly opened. The worm plunged directly into it. The ground fractured. The desert collapsed inward. An avalanche of stone and sand followed. For several seconds, the world seemed to tear itself apart. Then everything stopped. Silence. The survivors waited. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Nothing emerged. No tremors. No roar. No movement. The Sand Sovereign was gone. Buried beneath millions of tons of rock. 3 days later, the survivors reached the gate. Emergency teams evacuated the wounded. Military commanders declared the operation a success. News channels around the world celebrated. The monster had been defeated. Humanity had survived. For most people, that was the end of the story. For Ethan, it wasn't. Before the gate closed, he returned to the ruins one final time. Something about the mural bothered him, a detail he couldn't forget. Standing before the ancient wall, he finally saw it and wished he hadn't. The original carving wasn't depicting one worm. It depicted many, dozens, perhaps hundreds. The largest figure had simply hidden the others from view. His stomach dropped. The Sand Sovereign wasn't unique. It wasn't a god. It wasn't even fully grown. At the bottom of the mural, newly uncovered by shifting sand, another inscription had appeared. Harrison later translated it. The words haunted Ethan for the rest of his life. The young guard the desert. The elders sleep below. 1 week later, Gate 7 was permanently sealed. Officially, the operation was declared a victory. Unofficially, Ethan never believed it, because on the final night before the closure, seismic sensors recorded something deep beneath the red sands. Not one signal, not two, hundreds. And every one of them was larger than the creature humanity had barely managed to stop. Somewhere beneath that endless crimson desert, the elders were stirring, waiting, and praying that one day the gate would open again.